Fáilte a Chairde Gael. Welcome to episode 88 of the Rebel Matters podcast. I'm your host, Anla O'Carolan, half of the Rebel Matters team, the other half being Vicky Lankum, who is constantly in the background doing a lot of the donkey work to get the Rebel Matters episodes out there. And this week's episode is the very first of 2021 where we have a guest in the virtual Rebel Matters studio, and the guest this week is Ian Lynch, who many of you might be familiar with from being in the band Lankum, or more recently from his class podcast Far Year, of which I am a massive fan and also a patron. We went a pretty unconventional route for this episode, talking about the fighting fantasy gamebooks that Ian has been a fan of ever since he was about 8 or 9 years old, and we even played a bit of one of Ian's favourite books. We dipped the toe into the world of dungeon synth music, which Ian has been getting into during these lockdown times. We talked about the Far Year podcast and how it came about and how it's developed over the last year or so. And we talked a little bit about what Lankum have been up to recently. This episode is going to be just like listening in on two mates having a chat, which is always makes for a nice podcast. So I really think you are going to enjoy this episode. A couple of wee updates before we get stuck into the chat with Ian. First of all, thanks very much to Owen O'Sullivan, who gave us a lovely write-up in the Examiner last week and gave a special mention to the opening of the show, Fáilte a Chairde Gael. Now that that's been in the newspaper, I feel like we're going to have to keep it going. And also a special shout out to Emmett Walsh, who we commissioned to do a piece of art for our patrons. As any of the patrons of the show will already know, we have 3 tiers of support over on patreon.com based on 3 of our favourite native Irish trees, Sailach, Dar and Foinseog, or willow, oak and ash. And we wanted to do something special for the patrons. So Emmett designed this beautiful poster, and it's been a while in the making because we wanted to get it right, and we were thinking about what we could put into the poster in the first place, and then we were working on the designs and a little quote to go with the poster, and it's now ready. So thanks a million to Emmett. The poster is of a past guest of the podcast and a real hero of mine, and someone who made his life work be in service to the community that he was a part of and in support of the people of West Belfast. And long-term listeners of the podcast will probably have already listened to episode 26 with Father Des Wilson, and we're really honoured to be able to make this wee poster in honour of Father Des and as a small token of appreciation to the patrons who have been helping us keep the Rebel Matters podcast on the road. Anyway, we think it is a lovely poster and a beautiful piece of art, and it has a lovely quote from episode 27, which was the episode with Father Des, on the poster as well. So if you want to see the poster and check out the various tiers of support for the Rebel Matters podcast, then you can head over to patreon.com/Rebel Matters. Right, let's get stuck into episode 88 with Antuasal Ian O'Lynchy, Buinigi Soltas a Chairde. Thanks a million, first of all, for doing the podcast.
Well, thanks a million for having me. Love Rebel Matters. I've been listening to it for a while now, and just hope I can hold my own with up there with all the other deadly guests you've had over the last while.
I was just thinking there beforehand that the last time we seen each other in person was actually in America, and it was coming up on nearly a year ago now. Like, it was mid-March last year, when it was kind of a surreal enough experience being out there at that time, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, it was surreal enough without any of the COVID stuff that was going on anyway. It was it was a mad experience. And then when was the last day we saw you was outside that really dirty, greasy cafe.
That's right, the diner.
Yeah. Oh, the food. I couldn't even eat the food out of that. It was fucking dirty, man. So dirty.
Yeah, I think it was the only. America, the food is on another level, isn't it, over there?
Oh, it's like, and you can't. It's so hard to even try to eat healthy over there. You kind of just have to give up, and then you come home and you're just feeling horrible for weeks afterwards. All that. It takes ages for that stuff to get out of your system.
That gig you did there that night before that was in Springfield or something. It was called. I remember it was somewhere outside of Boston, and we went back to the B&B that night and had the crack at the B&B, and then I think that after that, then all the rest of the gigs were cancelled, and we were gone actually after the day we seen you in the diner.
I think we did one more after that. We did one more down in Virginia, and then it was just the other ones after that were cancelled, and we just had to try and get the hell out of there as fast as we could. I know you were talking to Rady about it all on the other episode, but were you talking to Rady about this? Or was it a different interview I was thinking of? Yeah, and just trying to get out on time. No, it was another interview I heard with her where she was talking to someone, but it was really just crazy trying to get out there on time because our flight was cancelled, and then we were just like, fuck, are all the flights going to be cancelled now? Are we going to be stuck in the States when this goes down? Like, is this the end of the world? What's happening? And you actually used the money from the Choice Awards that we just won and it just went into our account, I think, like the day before, to buy new tickets home, and just splurged it all on that. Managed to get another flight back, and we're just like thanking our lucky stars that we could actually make it back on time. It was a very, very strange experience. We had to drop back the amps we had rented out. A friend of ours, Liam Creel, he drove us with them into downtown Manhattan, like somewhere you'd only seen on movies and stuff in the past, but just the whole place completely deserted, like a ghost town. It was like proper 28 days later kind of thing, but just seeing the inside of a city on that scale, and a kind of such an iconic place, as New York being totally empty, it was just like it was pretty nerve-wracking.
It feels that we're kind of closing the loop here now, because the Choice Awards must have been something on the 6th of March or something like that, because I was in Vicar Street.
Something like that, yeah.
Choice Awards.
Oh, no way. That's weird.
That you had won it. Kane was up doing the... When your bus was broken down on the side of the road somewhere in America. And then the next morning, I went to America.
You left to Jesus.
And then we were in Manhattan when actually it was mental. It was just... There was people everywhere, and there was emergency news flashes coming up on all the TV screens, being outbreak, epicenter. And then the Kneecap lads did their gig on one of the days, and then it was the day after that. Then we came to meet yous, and then it was a couple of days after that. Then we were gone back, and then a couple of days after that again. Then yous came back. Mad.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's all very bonkers looking back at it now, isn't it?
Yeah. So what have you been getting up to since then?
Loads of stuff. Basically, I've been just indulging in every single thing that I couldn't do for the last 7 years because of Lankum. So the moment I got home, I went back to where I live, which is up in the attic of my mum and dad's house in North Dublin. And just got over the jet lag after a few days, and just started yeah, I don't know. I just got like a kind of creative surge, I suppose. I was like, I made my mind up that, so I started getting the COVID payment, and I was like, yes, this is amazing. Like, like totally one of those scumbags that Leo Varadkar was going on about, these people getting more money on the COVID payment than they are in the real jobs. It's terrible. And I was like, fuck yeah, give it all to me. And so I splashed out on this kind of new, like musical interface and a new mic and, some gear just because I'd been doing the Fire Drawn Air for 5 or 6 months already at that stage, and I was like, yeah, I think I want to get a bit of gear and kind of bring it up a notch or two quality wise. So I got all that, and then I got Pro Tools and stuff, and I was just kind of messing around with it, and I kind of got the idea to do the Wild Rover episodes, and so I kind of started working on those straight away after I got back. And I was doing this thing, songs from the crack pipe. It was, basically I was at home. My sister had started working from home. She writes for Lonely Planet. And so she was working from home. And anytime I was at home trying to play music or usually trying to sing, she'd be going, Ian, shut up. And, I'd be singing in the shower or whatever. And she was just freaking out. And so I was like, I'm going to have to find, something else to do here. So I was going out for walks and trying to find places just go and sing, and then there was this concrete pipe in a building site out in the fields behind the where my mum lives, and I was just like, oh fuck, I'll just sit in here and can just sing all day. And so I started doing that and just recording the videos and sticking them up online, and I was doing we're still working on the radio show and the podcasts and stuff, and I don't know, I kind of felt it was after a very short time, just felt a really just renewed sense of wellness, and being like, yeah, this is what I should be doing. I was going out for swims in the sea, because that's it's out by the coast there where they live. It's like cycle for 15 minutes or 10 minutes even, and I'm out at the sea. Really nice beach there out in Portmarnock, and so I was going out swimming. I was walking a lot. There's lots of really nice walks, and I was just felt liberated from the kind of, because for the last good few years now, stuff with Lankum has been so busy, so busy, just constantly on tour, constantly exhausted, drinking too much because you're off playing gigs the whole time, and just not feeling healthy at all, missing out on so much sleep. And I don't know, life just became so calm and peaceful and easy. I had all the time in the world to be working on creative projects that I just didn't have any time for with the band. You think, oh yeah, being in a band, you're living this creative, the art life, as David Lynch calls it. But it's not. It's just you spend some time maybe in the whole cycle of album, tour, recording. There's some part of that where you're being creative and you're actually, in the creative flow and you're making stuff. And most of the time, you're just playing stuff that you've come up with years ago, because that's you have to play that at gigs, and so you're not really exercising those faculties. So it only took a week or two getting back from the States for me to get into this swing, but I was just this is the best thing that's ever happened, and I mean it's kind of hard to talk about, and I know there's so many people have had such bad experiences, and it feels terrible that in a way, I do. I'm just. I have to be careful. You have to be careful who you say that to. I was saying on the podcast the other day, but in terms of all that stuff, I'm just 2020 was just my best year. Because all the stuff and all the time I found to do these things, and just spending time by myself, which is one of my favorite things to do. It's just a whole new lease of life, that I hadn't experienced in such a long time.
Did you feel like you were kind of reconnecting with your roots in terms of spending more time with folk songs? And through the podcast, it seems like you're probably doing a lot of research for the podcast and discovering new songs and stuff like that there as well. It seems to be something that you're really passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something that I had. Yeah, I've been into for a long time, the history of traditional songs, the social history surrounding that whole area. Folklore, the whole lot of it. Before Lankum really got too busy, I was lecturing out in UCD. I'd done a degree in folklore and early Irish out there. So there's just all this stuff that really like excites me and that really I'm passionate about, that I just kind of found that I just had no time for, when the band was going full tit. So yeah, it's just been really amazing to kind of connect back into that and rediscover the things that, really make me happy. Like delving into the songs and just following these musical trails and like, spending a few hours a day just researching songs that I'm interested in and finding strange little parallels and connections to other songs and other musical genres and stuff. I'm like, this is like, to me, this is just a life, I can't believe I have all this time to do this. And not only that, but there's actually people out there who want to listen to me just ramble on about just obscure shit, like,
Where did you get that interest from in the first place, do you reckon?
I don't know, like, it's, I suppose when I was a teenager, I started getting into, like traditional songs, more like the well-known stuff like Christy Moore and Planksty and the Dubliners. But I think as time went on, I kind of, I suppose I just became more and more drawn towards the kind of background to them. I'd be always looking up the albums and, reading, we got this song from such and such person. I was always interested in the kind of album notes and stuff that people would have. And from there, I suppose I just took it a step further. And it probably would have been, back when I was doing my degree out in UCD, the degree in folklore, that I started to realise, this is a whole actual like academic subject, people looking into traditional songs and studying all different aspects of them. And that's something that really kind of like fired up my passion. And then I suppose it just became like matter of course that whenever I was learning a new song, whether for my own singing or for doing with the band, I would always just try to find out as much as I could about that song. I'd look up all the different versions I could find. I'd look up like internet discussions about the backgrounds and the histories of the song. I'd look up JSTOR for like academic articles that were written in journals about the songs over the years, and just try to, just for my own understanding of the song and what it was all about, and what was going on. Because, I mean, when sometimes you listen to traditional songs, you get your own ideas and your own imagery about it, and that's just as valid as anything else. But I always kind of just felt the urge to maybe go a bit further and really, like, I wanted to have an understanding of what it was I was singing about, What did this term mean? Okay, this term means something to us now, but what did it mean 200 years ago, What did this represent 100 years ago when people started singing it first, all those like kind of things.
Far Drawn Year, for me, has kind of been a link, like the link between the superficial sound of a song and the dark, like, underbelly of like folk music. Like, you don't really, when you're just listening to an album, like, you don't get that, like, unless you're going off to do all the research, like the way you're doing it. So that's kind of been like a really nice link. Like, out there, actually, one of the things I was just listening to it there the other week, and I was thinking, like, I never realised how similar English folk music was to Irish folk music.
Oh yeah,
in a lot of ways, like, whereas before I was like probably similar to what you were saying there, like when I was in my early teens or whatever, start listening to Christy Moore and the Dubliners and the Wolf Tones, and like that's what folk music represented for me at that time or whatever. But then when you hear like the old recordings of broadsheet ballads that are recorded in some like tavern somewhere in England, then you start to kind of like feel the bond with people over there. Whereas in Ireland, like historically, I suppose it's been a separation that's been emphasized with England.
Yeah, I think so. And that's also that was something really instructive for me to find out about and really interesting to look into as well, because I mean you can't deny it when you start to look into it. You're going, okay, well, there's people singing pretty much the same songs, they made their way across the Irish Sea in both directions for a long time, there's such cross-pollination going on, and I mean it makes sense. And then you start to read, I mean there's some stuff that I if I had to come across this statement like 15 years ago would have made me really angry, but like you hear scholars talking about, as far as English language singing goes, because there obviously is there a very separate like Irish language singing tradition that has a completely different evolution and a completely different history. But as far as English language singing goes, that Ireland, Scotland, and England can be counted as the same thing, because there's so much cross pollination going on between them. And yeah, that doesn't have anything to say about whatever political situations there might be, but just in terms of English language song. And you're going, well, yeah, actually, when you look into it, it makes sense. Sounds like a very controversial thing to say, in some ways. But yeah, and I think it's just, it's always a nice thing to see when you just, you see people's just, the common humanity in people, and you're going, well, people aren't that different wherever you go in the world,
Yeah, that's the other thing is through the songs, like it kind of is like a time capsule and brings you back to the time when that song was first invented or written down or whatever. And then when I'm sitting there listening to, like, especially like the Wild Rover series, where there's versions of being plucked out from all over the place, like, and you're sitting thinking the same kind of stuff that was going on in like Ireland was happening in England, where like there was someone going in drinking all their money away and like having these interactions with these banning teas.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's another thing that's just so like fascinating for me, that you can look at somebody's like situation 200, 250 years ago, 300 years ago, and you're like, it's just exactly the same as what goes on now, like you're separated like in space and time from these people. Like, yeah, it could be someone in England like 200 years ago singing about this thing, and you're going, yeah, but and that's just the thing. It speaks to people's just common humanity, and it's something that's just very innate and human about all of us,
Do you think that's something like, even just based on like the feedback and stuff and the people who've been getting in contact with you about the podcast, like, what do you think is it that makes Fire Drawn Year so like, that makes people so attached to it? Because it has kind of like really like taken off in a way, like, hasn't it? Like if there's a proper like podcast following there of like Fire Drawn Year hardcore fans now, like.
It seems like it. Yeah, it seems like it. I'm kind of blown away by it. But yeah, that thing, if you stick something up on the internet and there's like 100 people like this thing, and what are 100 fucking people doing liking this thing that I'm putting out? And that I kind of thought for a long time, I'm just like, who would be into this? Like, people are into songs, but they're not going to listen to like 50 versions of one song and hours of rambling about why the different versions are different, and like what happened to them over the course of a few hundred years. But yeah, it seems like there are people out there definitely with a very big interest in it. And I don't know, maybe I think there's definitely what I'm coming to realize over, like, definitely in today's like society, and even amongst the people that we know, there's a real like hunger and a need and a kind of an attraction, I think, that people have towards understanding this kind of stuff more deeply, whether it's like Irish folklore, Irish language, traditional music and song. I think there's a very strong pull that all those kind of those subjects and those parts of culture have now that really wasn't there like 20 years ago when I started to, or 25 years ago when I started to listen to this kind of thing. It really wasn't there in the same way. And I think the level of interest now that younger generations have towards like these parts of, or these aspects of Irish culture, it's amazing and really inspiring. I think it kind of hints toward a very different maybe attitude that people have towards their own culture.
I just started reading Lankum McGann's 32 Words for Fear.
It's so good.
Yeah, and like that must have been one of the best-selling books for Christmas altogether.
Yeah.
Like I got one for one of my brothers for Christmas as a present, and it was the last copy that they had in the shop when I bought it in Waterstones. And I feel like maybe what you're kind of talking about there is applies to those kind of books where it's like delving into the Irish language and the richness of it. And I kind of get the sense that from speaking to people who have read it, and even from listening to Lankum talking about it, we all, like, on some sort of primal level, need to feel a sense of belonging. And I think that connection to folklore and songs that are like time capsules that bring you back to years gone by, or give you an insight into the richness of the Irish language, is kind of does that in a way.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, like, I've been thinking about this a bit, and I think the kind of where we're living now and the age that we're living in and the kind of level of technological like progress we're at and everything else, I think we're living in a kind of a time that has never occurred before, whereby we literally have no like mythologies to sustain us, you know, like basically any time in the past in human society, there's always been stories and narratives that people had that explained our position in the cosmos and explained why we're here, explained life, explained death, explained everything. But if you look at like modern 21st century capitalist Western society, we've got absolutely nothing. Like, it's a completely nihilistic like worldview. It's like, yeah, we're just like colonies of bacteria on this rock spinning through the endless nothingness forever, and there's no reason. It's just pure blind mechanical chance that we're here at all. And like, that's such a empty worldview, you know, compared to the richness of what we had in the past. Now, I'm not saying that I mean it also makes sense, and you know, I wouldn't really be religious in that kind of way, but I do think that there is something missing, you know, from our lives. I think where we've always had these things to help us along, we've kind of like, we've thrown it all away, and in Ireland rightly so, because, you know, our kind of one connection to that source for a long time was the Catholic Church, and now we've quite rightly fucked it out. But you kind of worry about, in some ways, like, well, what takes that place, you know, in our lives? What goes where that used to be? Like, there's nothing there. What do people do? Like, they go shopping when they feel bad, buy shit they don't need, you know? It's like, where are the stories, and where are the narratives, and where do we get our meaning from? So I think there's a real hunger and a real need for stuff like on this level, you know, on a much deeper level.
Like, in some ways, it feels like we've overexposed ourselves, or become overexposed to technology and information, so that there's kind of less wonderment.
Absolutely.
Like something like that, which actually kind of leads on really nicely to the next thing I was going to ask you about the fighting fantasy game books that you've been that you've been like kind of involved in since you were really young. So, but like, what's the story there?
Yeah, I definitely think that kind of operates in a very similar kind of place. So yeah, the first time I came across these game books, I was about I think I was 8 years old, 7 or 8, and my mate Christo Reeves in school, he gave me a lend of one of them. It was this book called Trial of Champions, and I was like, oh, what's this? And kind of took it off. And so basically it's it's a game book. So you would take the kind of, you read the story and it's like, oh, you are a brave warrior and you live in this magical land, and basically you have a choice in the game book. So it would say, okay, you are in this place, and say you're in a room, there's a door over in the west wall, there's a creature sitting there. What do you want to do? Do you want to talk to the creature? Do you want to go through the door? Do you want to attack the creature? And it gives you all these choices. So you have the ability, while you're reading the book or playing the game, to decide how the story will go. But not only that, but there's also an element of randomness and chance, and that kind of takes the form of in-book mechanic, where you have 2 6-sided dice that you'll roll for various things. So sometimes you'll be called on to test your skill in a certain situation. So basically you have 3 attributes. There's skill, stamina, and luck. And say, for example, you have your skill might be 10. So you would be oh, I want to jump over this chasm with my rope tied to a rafter, and it'd be oh, I'll test your skill. So you have to try to roll underneath your skill to make it or not. Or at some stages you test your luck. Or there's also mechanics for fighting with the creatures, where you would roll the dice and add them to your skill score. Then you roll 2 for the creature and add it to its skill score, and whoever gets the most wounds the other one, and you take away 2 points of damage. So all these different mechanics going on. It's basically a very light version of Dungeons and Dragons or something like that.
So it's kind of the book is the book and the dice and the instructions and the illustrations in the book are helping to facilitate this world inside your head where you're
absolutely
getting into fights and jumping over stuff and then making different choices as you go along.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was thinking about this a while ago, and I think a lot of it has to do, like, I'm kind of really into the ideas of Joseph Campbell and the whole story about like the hero's journey and the monomyth and all that kind of stuff. And if you look at all the different stages of the hero's journey, it's like so much of it comes up in these books, you know. It's like even you read the back of the book and it says all the time, like, you are the hero. Like, and every single one, part story, part game, this is a book in which you become the hero. So like the hero's journey is such a big part of it. And I think, like, looking back on it now, I realise that it's a kind of, it was a way definitely for me, because like I was never really into like going to mass or anything like that. Like, you know, I was brought up a Catholic, made my communion and confirmation and all that, but like didn't really mean anything to me. And it didn't really speak to my kind of like, you know, mythological side or, you know, the subconscious kind of side of me. But then I realised that by participating in these kind of game books, you're dealing with all this, like all these archetypes and mythological adventures, like, you know, the whole story. It's like that interpretation of like basically like the Greek myths and the whole underworld kind of sagas. It's all about like delving into your subconscious, and the monsters represent, you know, different fears or like traumas you might have. So I think, yeah, by like, you know, a lot of these books take place in dungeons and you're crawling through dungeons, battling monsters. It's like a way of interacting with that whole like mythological kind of like dream realm, you know. And I think that's kind of what I was doing, and that's one reason why I was so drawn into them at that stage of my life.
Like before we recorded this episode here now, like we were going to do this in person up in Dublin.
Yeah,
and like,
that's a real shame.
All the kind of shit hit the fan or whatever.
Yeah.
So we didn't get through it, but you sent me. I've seen some of the pictures of your collection of books that you have.
Yeah.
Holy moly! Like, did you start collecting them from when you were about 8 or 9?
Yeah. So the first one I got was a book called Caverns of the Snow Witch, and I still have that copy of that. I think, maybe you saw the picture of the one, and it said like IL was here, blah blah blah, 1990. You know, like, so it was like like 9 years old, and I still have these. So at that time, I maybe had about like, after a few years, you know, I was always asking my ma to buy them for me, and she'd be like, "Oh, save up your pocket money, and you know, you can get one or whatever." So I kind of ended up having about maybe 13 or 14 of them, and then a few years ago, so my son is 13 now. When he was about 8 or 9 himself, I remember going back to my ma's and finding these books, and I was like, "Oh, Lou, check it out, we have to get into these." And he was like, "Oh, cool, yeah." So we used to read them together, and then I really enjoyed playing them with him. You know, I'd read out the passages and give him the choices to make and stuff, you know. And so, you know, it was really just a good bit of crack we had together. And but then I started realising, I was like, "Oh, there's, you know, so many books missing from the collection." So in the original run of fighting fantasy books, so like fighting fantasy is the main kind of series that I was into. There was other ones like Lone Wolf and other kind of ones, but fighting fantasy for me were the ones. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to try and like finish, you know, complete the collection, you know, because there's 59 of these books, and there's still more getting made now. I think one came out a few months ago by Rihanna Pratchett, wrote, I think she's Terry Pratchett's daughter. But anyway, 59 in the original run of the books. So I started kind of, looking for them second hand, and, you know, picking up a few on eBay. And so I have most of the original 59 now. I'm still missing 3 of them. But there are 3 really expensive ones, so I'm not really in any rush. I'm still kind of like hoping for the day that I'm just going to walk into a second-hand shop and they're going to be there waiting for me. But
are they like they numbered or something like that?
Yeah. So you'll see here, like House of Hell is number 10, and they're really recognisable as well because they've got these green spines on them. So you my eyes are trained. Like if I walk into a charity shop and there's one on the shelf, I'm just like, bam, I see it straight away. It's just like, yeah, it pops out in my vision. And I just buy whenever I find them, even if they're ones that I have already, I'll just buy them and just, you know, give them people for presents or whatever. So yeah, I'm always on the lookout.
Has the kind of scene changed with the way the technology has changed? Because the first one was written like in the 70s or something that they came out first?
I think the first one, the Warlock of Fartop Mountain, it might be 81. 82, sorry. 82, and yeah, I mean, things have obviously changed so much. So at that time, I mean, when I was into these first, I had like an old Commodore 64, and there used to be like text adventures on the computer, which was basically like a computer game version of these, but it's just like text on a screen, kind of describing the stuff, and you type in what you want to do. So already at that stage, you know, the kind of technology of these things was kind of becoming more and more advanced, and then obviously like into the 90s and 2000s, just computer game technology has just exploded. So it's kind of hard to see that, you know, actual like real print books like these could ever have any kind of like cultural kind of standing like they had in the 80s, you know, because they were absolutely huge in the 80s. They really caught off so much, like they were, and that's why you still like, you see the earliest books like this, like City of Thieves, the you know, the ones that are in like maybe the first like 1 to, I don't know, 20 or 30, you still see them in charity shops all over the place, because the print runs were just massive, you know. But as the books kind of go up in number, I think they were falling in popularity, and so when you get up to like the 40s and 50s, they were only being printed maybe like a few thousand of them, so they get much rarer, you know. So it's ironically the earlier ones that aren't as valuable and that are easier to find, and the later numbers you don't see around as much.
Like, it sounds like kind of the way that like vinyl is after making a comeback and stuff like that. For whatever reason, that like something really beautiful just about having a book and it just being your imagination, just kind of that the work is happening on the inside as opposed to happening like on the screen or whatever.
I think so, and I think that's just another aspect. It's almost like it's a very kind of natural and kind of gut reaction to the kind of emptiness of modern society and of people living their lives kind of more and more digitally and virtually, you know, on the internet. It's like, I think, you know, people there's just like a need there for, I don't know, for a life that's just more tactile and things you can feel and touch, and that just seem to have more meaning, you know, because everything you see on the screen is like, you get sucked into it, but then you turn it off and it's just gone. You know, it's not there anymore. But like, just having these actual things in real life you can pick up and hold, and you can smell them, and, you know, they have a personality all by themselves. It's like, it's real life, you know, it's different. Such a different thing. Yeah. It's like the difference between, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, to me, it's like the difference between sitting in a room with somebody who's like singing or playing music and listening to it on a recording, you know. It's like a completely different thing. One is only a very, very like pale approximation of the other one, you know. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite one?
I do, actually, yeah. My absolute favorite one, I have a copy of it here. It's called Creature of Havoc. Now, this is the like modern reprint. I have like a very old, fallen apart copy that was mine with different artwork on it, but that was number 24 in the series. And I remember my ma bought that for me in a bookshop when I was maybe like the same age, 9 or 10, when I was getting most of them. But it's absolutely like the most complex one of all. So there was 2 writers that were involved in this series. There was Steve Jackson and Ian Livingston, and Steve Jackson was by far like the more cerebral of the 2, and his books were really sneaky and full of like puzzles and traps and just way more complicated. So this book, it took me years and years to finish it, and like maybe 3 or 4 years, and I used to go back every few months and play it again and again and again. So yeah, I was showing you the picture earlier. So when you start off the game, you don't know who you are or what you're doing. You're basically like in a tunnel. You don't know who you are, how you got there. Your actions aren't your own. There's a little dwarf beside you, and if you choose to help him or talk to him, you end up just strangling him anyway, and you're totally not in control of your actions. And sometimes you go to make a choice and it says, oh, I'll roll a dice, and if you roll like a 1 to 3, you just do the opposite thing anyway. You know, you're totally not in control of your actions. You can't understand what anybody is saying, and it's this language in the book that looks really crazy. And all the creatures in the book are talking to you in this language that makes no sense. And only when you get like, you know, you progress in the game, you find like a ring or something, or you find a scroll, and the scroll tells you how to translate the language, and then you learn, and then you can go back and apply the code to all the language you've seen, and you can actually figure out what it means. But there was one really, really, really genius part in the book, and it took me years to figure this out. And it's all to do with, because of the creature that you are, and you have such a little understanding of the world around you, it requires a really great leap of thinking outside the box to break out of this dungeon and find the secret door on the way out. And the way it was done in the book was genius. And some people think it was a mistake that was printed in the original book, but I don't think it's a mistake at all. I just think it was really clever. So basically what happens is you get this magic ring, and whenever you're in a room with a secret door, the ring is meant to glow and let you know that the secret door is there. And the mechanic in the book, which lets you know about this, it's something like, it says, if you walk into a room and the paragraph starts off with the phrase, you find yourself in a room, then add 50 onto the paragraph number to find the secret door. But there's no paragraph that starts off with that phrase. There's a room that starts off with a phrase that's very similar, and if you add the 50 to that, then it works. But it's almost a way of making you think outside the box as the monster to gain this leap in consciousness and find your way out of the dungeon. And it's fucking genius. And it literally took me 3 or 4 years to figure that out. And I remember the day I got it, and I was like, oh my God. Couldn't believe it.
Were you doing this? Was some of your friends doing this as well, or was this just you kind of on a solo journey?
At this stage, it was just me.
And I'm just trying to imagine, when you're reading it, do you when you were reading these, when you were a kid, were you acting out the stuff, or are you just sitting there in a chair reading it, or are you getting into it physically as well?
I wasn't getting into it physically. Now there was some parallels to the books in real life, in that behind my house out in Baldoyle there was an old race course, and in the race course it was basically they had the ruins of the stands where people used to sit and watch the races, but it was just mountains of rubble. But there was these underground tunnels underneath them where you'd go down, and it was just dark tunnels with passages that went off to to the left and the right. And I used to go under there, and that to me was the real life equivalent of these books. But that's as close as I got. I wasn't into LARPing or anything like that, but it was basically, it was just me at home being a total nerd and reading these books and rolling dice.
Do you fancy reading a piece out of one of your favourite ones there?
Yeah, maybe I'll start off with this one, Creature of Havoc. Maybe I'll just pick up a random page, maybe, will I?
Yeah.
Okay. So you indicate to him, this is passage 297, you indicate to him that your wounds hurt and that you have a sore head. He invites you to lie down on his bed. The bed is much too small for you, but you manage to keep your balance and lie down while he examines you. The physician rises jerkily from the desk and totters quickly over to the bed. His bony fingers probe the areas around your wounds and rub the side of your head. As I thought, he says, making an uncomfortable rasping sound as he scratches his head. Your body has a mild poison circulating within it. I have an antidote. Quimblebone clatters across to a drawer and takes out a small flask. Drink this, he orders. You hesitate, but he is insistent and becomes angry at your refusals. Will you drink the potion as he demands, or will you refuse and attack the creature? What do you want to do?
I'll drink the potion.
Okay, 228. You lie back and relax while the physician pours the potion into your mouth. You become drowsy and eventually drift off into a peaceful sleep. Almost immediately, you start to have a disturbing dream in which you are lying down and being attacked by knives wielded by a skeletal hand. You struggle to escape, but your movements are slow and ineffective. Again and again, the knives are driven into your chest and abdomen. The shock makes you wake up immediately. You are unable to move at all. All you can do is watch as a specimen jar is held over your chest and a bony hand drops an organ into it. The organ is beating and the tub noise fills your ears. Your last perception of life is watching your own heart slowly stop beating. The end.
I should not have drank that potion.
In fairness, it was a 50-50. So yeah, I mean, the decisions are full of, not only can you die in a battle, but there's also instant death. passages like that where you make the wrong choice and you can. So basically, what I used to do when I was playing when I was younger was I'd often like keep a finger in the page and go to the one, and if it was something bad, I'd just turn back, where my finger had bookmarked. But sometimes you'd have to kind of go down the trail of a few different choices, and like you'd have like 3 fingers in the book, like, holding bookmarks like that. But basically, it's only now if I go back and play one now, I do it, by the book and follow all the rules properly, and it's actually much more fun. I found following the actual rules.
Keeping the finger in the book is kind of like having a cheat for the PlayStation or whatever. When you die,
yeah.
Not dead anymore.
Exactly, yeah. Infinite lives.
See, when you were reading that though, I was just like, it makes you feel like, kind of like emotionally, like when I was sitting there thinking about having a dream where I was getting stabbed in the heart, like, it makes you like you can feel it you can feel the emotions like working inside you, like.
Yeah, and it's so evocative, and I think the artwork in the books, it's just, for me, it's really distinctive, like just black and white artwork. But especially when I look back at it now, it's got such a nostalgic value. I can remember the first time playing it at home when I was a kid. You have what they call an adventure sheet, which is like basically where you keep a note of how much stamina you have left. So like, I'll show you here. Your skill, stamina, and your luck. So your stamina would be, at the start of the game, you roll 2 dice and add that to 12, and that's your stamina. So you might have 18, 19 stamina. If you get wounded, you lose 2 or 3, and then if it gets to 0, you're dead. And you'd keep items carried or information. So it just brings it all to life so much, Yeah. And the writing can be quite evocative as well. So it's really just easy just to lose yourself in it, and just become, you're just lost in this totally magical world.
Here, do another one there.
Okay. Maybe I'll try another one. This one is called City of Thieves. This is a really good adventure in a like a manky city. Okay, so when you hear the guards coming down the stairs, you lie on the floor and start to groan. They unlock the cell door and enter. If you wish to continue with your feigned illness and tell them that you think you've got the plague, turn to 306. If you wish to fight them unarmed, turn to 157.
Fight them unarmed.
Fight them unarmed. Okay, 157. You leap up and punch the first guard. He staggers back and draws his sword. You fight them one at a time in the small cell, and then it gives you the values for the 2 guards. So they have a skill and a stamina. And so basically this is where you'd have a battle with them, rolling the dice and all the rest of it. And then it says, during each attack round, you must deduct 3 from your attack strength because you were fighting barehanded. If you manage to defeat the guards, you leave the cell and climb the stairs, picking up your sword off the table. So turn to 54. So we're after defeating the guards. You search the gatehouse and find 2 gold pieces and a merchant's pass permitting the holder to trade in Port Blacksand. Taking your findings with you, you creep outside. The guard at the main gate does not see you and you walk into the city. Turn to 74. Through the main gates you see that the rubbish-filled streets of the port are narrow and cobbled. Old and decrepit buildings line them closely, with their upper stories overhanging menacingly. You may go west down Quay Street, head north along Market Street, or go east down Clock Street.
Go north.
Okay, so head north along Market Street, turn to 116. Walking north along the street, you see the entrance to a small herbalist's shop on your left. Looking through the window, you can see a wooden counter with a pair of scales upon it, and many sacks of different herbs crowding the floor. There is a small archway leading out of the back of the shop to another room. There is an open sign on the door, but the shop is empty. If you wish to enter the shop, turn to 250. If you would rather continue walking north up Market Street, turn to 93.
We'll go into the shop, sure.
We'll go in and see what they have. Yeah. There's an illustration for this one.
Ooh, he looks menacing.
He does. He looks nasty. A small bell rings as the door opens and a creature wearing a brown apron over his clothing hurries through the archway from the back room into the shop to stand behind the counter. He appears human-like but has very ugly facial features and pointed teeth. You realise he is half man, half orc. A sharp hand axe hangs from his belt to remind you that Port Black Sand is unlikely to be a friendly place in which to do business. Will you inquire about the herbs? Ask if the man-orc knows of Nicodemus. So Nicodemus is a wizard who lives in the city that you're looking for. Or attack the man-orc. It seems a bit attacking him as soon as he went to a shop because you don't like the look of him. That's brutal.
We're going to try and find Nicodemus.
Okay, ask if the man-orc knows of Nicodemus. Turn to 342. It's funny because some of the books, you realise, like the first one, The Warlock of Firetop Mountain, you realise after you've played it, you're like, I just walked into somebody else's like home and like basically I killed them and then stole their money, and somehow I'm the hero of the whole thing. You know,
I was just sitting there thinking, like, this just goes on. Like, I mean, it's kind of addictive, isn't it? Like, you're just like,
it really is. Yeah. Well, just do it. Just do it. Yeah, we could be here all day, you know. The man orc tells you that for 1 gold piece, he will tell you all he knows. If you want to pay for his information, turn to 289. If you would rather leave the shop and continue your walk north, turn to 93.
I keep up my 1 gold piece. No way.
Okay.
That's way too much.
Hey, fuck off, man orc. Go to 93 instead. Continue north. On the right-hand side of the street, you see a tavern called the Spotted Dog. If you want to enter the tavern, turn to 62. If you would rather continue north, turn to 296.
But in the tavern, definitely.
Okay, into the tavern. Yeah, it's a better way to spend your gold piece. Oh, look at another illustration.
What's happening there? Oh, Jesus, they're fucking miserable-looking creatures in there as well, aren't they?
I know, yeah. Load of no cracks. Okay, so we do this quickly. The old wooden doors open into a dingy, smoke-filled room. There are 8 round tables in the centre of the room with some of the most mean and shifty-looking rogues you have ever seen sitting at them. At the back of the tavern is a long wooden bar covered with bottles and mugs. Behind the bar stands the innkeeper wearing a grubby apron. He is quite old, bald, and has an ugly black scar running down his right cheek. Not all the customers are human. Will you, there's a load of choices here now, will you walk to the bar and talk to the innkeeper? Sit down at a table with 3 dwarfs who are playing a dice game. Sit down at a table with 2 goblins who are arguing. Sit down with 3 men who are sticking daggers quickly between their fingers on the table. Or leave the tavern and walk north.
I think you might sit down with who was playing the dice games at the dwarfs, was it?
The dwarfs are playing a dice game.
Say they're probably a bit of crack there.
Yeah, a bit safer than the dagger lads.
Yeah.
Okay, 173. The 3 old bearded dwarfs are so involved with their game that they pay you no attention as you sit down at their table. Finally, one turns to you and asks if you would like to join their game. If you wish to gamble some of your gold pieces, turn to 206. If you would rather leave the smoky tavern and walk north, turn to 296.
I'm keeping a hold of my gold piece. Fuck that.
Yeah.
Fucking dwarfs.
Okay. Leave the tavern and turn north, 296. Oh no, so now, okay, walking towards you down the street are 2 men wearing black robes which cover them completely except for their eyes. On seeing you, they nod at each other and draw their swords. They are thieves, hoping to rob you of your possessions, and you must defend yourself. Fight them one at a time. And a thief, skill 7, stamina 7. The other one is skill 8, stamina 6. Another battle there. So yeah, it just goes on. And so I sent you the map there that was made for the Warlock of Firetop Mountain, and one of the things that was encouraged in these games was to draw your own map, because there's so many choices and stuff, you know, to keep a handle on where you are in the game and not get lost and stuff. So that was another fun part of it. Yeah,
class. Actually, the choices, the out of context choices list, I think we should talk about that. I'm actually going to bring it up here. So when we were chatting earlier on before we started recording, where is it there now? You sent me the list of choices. Where the hell did they go? Oh, I have them here. So
yeah, this was we have to give credit to Vicky for this idea. She was saying it was almost like Brian Eno's oblique strategies.
Yeah.
The cards, because I've seen them in, sometimes when you go to record in a studio, they have these cards for when you're stuck, you pick up a card and it will just give you some enigmatic phrase. But I never even thought about this, that some of the choices in the games could be just like completely taken out of context and used in life, whenever you're stuck or you're not sure what to do next.
Yeah, so I'm going to just pull a few of them out. So whenever you're not sure what to do in life, search your memory for another means of attack.
Yeah.
Good advice.
Absolutely.
There's try to grab the keys and go for the nearest door. Actually, I wish I had done that more often.
Just
That
get
one.
out of there. Yeah. Absolutely. It's always good to know when to do that.
Yeah, apologize, bow, and leave the room.
I wish I had done that a lot more in life. Really.
Get down on all fours and try to creep into the room unnoticed. And, stride over to the dwarf, give him a jab with your sword, and put on an evil laugh for the torturers.
Well, I'm not sure when that would come in handy, but you know.
There's another one here. Just says swim.
Yeah, I like that one. There's one, walk across the room, stepping only on hands.
That's what
I think my favourite one now. This could just come in handy and for all aspects of life. Throw cheese at it.
Actually, one of my favourite ones when I was reading them earlier was spring at the chieftain in the hope that his servant will aid you.
Yeah, because I was thinking about that. There's so many like kind of like philosophical sides to that, you know, because you're going, has a servant become so institutionalized that he's going to stick up for the chieftain, you know, when you go to attack him, or is he going to recognize his chance for liberation? You know, the whole thing of like the oppressed kind of internalizing their own oppression. I thought that was great. Just in that one phrase there, there's so much going on.
That one, when I read that earlier, I was thinking of the thing like that I had in my head whenever I was like a kid back in the day. I was like, if I ever get into a fight, I was like, and there's more than one person, you just go for the person who's in charge.
Yeah. That was always my dad's advice. He's like, if there's ever a gang of lads, just go for the biggest fella.
Yeah.
You know,
and the rest of them just
stop. Really? Yeah. If they see you, he's like, if they see you battering him, then they're none of the rest of me. But I'm not going to batter the biggest fella. He's going to kill me, and then they're all going to hop on me.
And here, so what about the dungeon synth music that you've mentioned a few times on the podcast? It seems like there's kind of a common theme here between the main kind of projects that you're involved in, like with Fire Drawn Year, and like going back to like even some of the scenes from, say, the Wild Rover songs are very similar to the picture that was in that book there of walking into the tavern.
Yeah. There's a few like bits of artwork that I've kind of used on, you know, when I'm putting stuff about the podcast online, and I'm like, these are just perfect. Like there's just these wonky scenes in bars, like with weird like gnomes and goblins playing fiddles and stuff like that, and I was like, just fits in so perfectly. But I suppose. Yeah, I don't know. I suppose now I'm just at a point in my life where I found a way to like express myself using the middle of the Venn diagram with all the weird things that I'm into, you know, and that I've kind of been into over the years, but probably never like told anyone about, because I'm like, no, no one really understands this thing. But now I'm just like, fuck it, I'm 40. I don't care what anyone thinks anymore. Yeah, I play these game books that were written for kids, and yeah, I'm into like, you know, weird traditional songs that no one knows about or whatever, you know. I just like, you know, I'm totally comfortable with it now. But yeah, I suppose the dungeon synth is another aspect of this. So this is like a genre of music that I first became aware of probably about like 2 or 3 years ago. There's this Italian cassette label called Heimat der Katastrophe, and they just put out cassettes of this music, which to me, like when I heard it first, I was like, this sounds like music basically from a Commodore 64 game that was based on Dungeons and Dragons, and that's their total vibe as well. It's very kind of retro, and just basically people making music constrained by probably like, you know, trying to kind of use the technology that was used back in the 80s, but, you know, with like Commodore 64 SID chips and stuff like that. But it's basically like 8-bit and 16-bit music, very lo-fi, very simple, but just very, just that basically, I can't say any better than that music that would have been on a Commodore 64 D&D role-playing computer game. And I found it just really fascinating, and I've, you know, something I've kind of kept my eye on over the last few years, but now in the last few months I started kind of making my own dungeon synth music. I kind of, just figured out the different programs that I needed. So I wasn't sure how to make it before. I thought I might need to buy an old computer or something like that. But, as with everything now, you can just buy kind of like, virtual workarounds and just buy plugins and stuff like that. So I've started kind of making these tunes at home and just totally gotten sucked into it to the point where I'm like, I should be playing the pipes and learning new songs, but instead I'm making music that goes like boop, 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 boop. Like it's completely ridiculous. And maybe it's a form of procrastination, but whatever.
Right. We're going to stop the podcast for a few seconds to have a brief dungeon synth interlude. This is a wee section of a track that Ian has been working on himself that he sent us, and I thought it would be nice to add it in so you have an idea of what he's talking about and for a bit of added weirdness.
The way you're talking about the Venn diagram there, like
has
that transferred over to the way that like the music that you guys are making, like to your influence on the music is that you're making with Lankum?
No, I don't think the others would have it at all. But
well, like the Pride of Petrifor. That's pretty like sounds like pretty Dungeon and Dragony.
Yeah, actually, that's a bit. And to be honest, no, actually, yeah. To be honest about that, when we did get it together, so it was me and Cozzy that came up with that idea. We were in Liberty Hall at the time, and we were kind of going in 9 to 5 every day. This is like 2 years ago, over 2 years ago now, 2 and a bit years ago. Jesus, 2.5 nearly. And when me and Cozzy came up with that idea, we were like, we kind of had it in our head. We were like, it's like fucking a load of orcs going on a war march, in Lord of the Rings. And we're like, yeah, that's the vibe we'll go for. And I was like, deadly. We're just like really raw, really brutal, like no finesse about it, like, kind of slightly off key and out of tune. And just like, but yeah, it's a load of fucking orcs marching off to war. They're going to go and eat loads of hobbits. It's going to be amazing. And that we just had that in our heads the whole time. So no, that is very true. I didn't even think about that.
Like if you open yourself up to that track, it's terrifying.
Yeah. And then all the stuff we did with it in the studio as well was just basically like all stemming from this idea of being like an orcish war march. So that was the buzz. So yeah, maybe these things are coming into Lankum in a way. I didn't even think about
osmosis.
That. Osmosis. But you can't really help it, when you start to get into things, they just start to kind of bleed out beyond the edges and seep into other aspects of your life,
What are you doing at the minute with Lankum?
So we are here in this tower. Basically, we're minding this place for the owner, and we've got all our gear. I don't know if you saw all the gear on the floor there earlier on, but the whole room here is just full of our stuff. And we're kind of we're just coming in here every day from the morning until the evening, and we're coming up with new ideas and putting stuff together, and just with our kind of eyes on recording a new album at some stage this year.
Like what has the impact has the pandemic had on you, like as a band?
It's interesting because at the start, I think like everybody else, we were like, deadly, we're going to totally use this time to come up with so much new stuff. We're going to record loads of albums and and then like we didn't do anything for months and months. We did I think we did like 2 gigs. We did a Other Voices online thing in May maybe or June or something in Kilkenny in the castle, and then we did the Abbey live stream in August, and that was it. So Cormac was back in Sligo for most of it, and I suppose we were all just started. Like I said, I had my own projects going on. Rady was doing her solo thing. Darrett and Cormac were doing their own thing. So I think it was a chance for us to kind of just explore other areas that we hadn't time for. But now we've been back here now for the last week, and loads of new stuff coming together. And I think we all have lots of ideas, and it's just coming together really quickly, and it's really nice to be working on it again.
Just from speaking to loads of different people about what they've been doing since the first lockdown in March, it seems like there's a kind of a fairly common pattern where, like, it happened to me as well, for sure, where I was like, at the start, I was like, okay, going to be really productive, da, 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 da. And then the actual realization that taking a slower pace was needed for a while, and eventually then you come back around to being able to get into like the kind of creative zone again. You know what I was going to ask you was, you know, the way that all of the gigs got cancelled and stuff like that, and like pretty much every artist in the country has lost out from that point of view, but it seems to be like somewhat of a golden era for the kind of like call to arms for the followers of bands and stuff to get behind the bands, like, because it's become ever more important for people to get behind bands, support them with like crowdfunders or getting some merch off them or something like that, because of the fact that artists have become like more reliant on that than before. Have you found that has kind of come
absolutely,
Lankum followers and stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one reason that a lot, you were asking earlier about like people, you know, being supportive of Fire Draw Near. I think that's one reason why, you know, it's people who are into Lankum are, you know, really, really willing and open to support stuff like that. And also I noticed it with the kind of all the new merch that we made before Christmas. We had a new run, like new t-shirt designs and scarves and things like that. But the amount of orders we got was like absolutely phenomenal. It was like we were down every day, you know, morning until night time, packing parcels, bringing down 200 at a time to the post office. And it was just like one day the computer in the post office actually broke halfway through it. Like we were going in there so much, like 200 parcels. And then, you know, when you're doing the American ones, they have to print out forms with the addresses on them. So you'd be down there, like, be waiting an hour and a half just for them to sort out the whole thing, you know, paying like 500 or 600 quid a go just for postage. It was just like, I'd never dealt with it on that level before, but it was just amazing that like within, you know, like they put up the kind of the stuff on social media about having new merch, and within like a day or two, just it was all sold out. It was phenomenal to see that level of support and goodwill amongst people, you know.
One of the days during the summer there, I was walking down one of the streets in Cork, and I was wearing the black Lankum t-shirt with the orange front on it. And there was a girl walking across the other side of the street where I was wearing the same t-shirt. And we just give a little fist pump to each other. Like, yeah.
That's gas. Yeah, because we were having that conversation actually when we were like putting the packages together. We're like, it's going to be weird now, you know, in town in the summertime, we're going to be walking around, and it's like, there's so many of these t-shirts going out around Ireland, and Ireland's fucking tiny. Like, you know, we're definitely going to be walking past people wearing these t-shirts on the streets, and it's going to be weird. You know, it's going to be just like, oh, fuck. They wouldn't want to embarrass people. I remember me and Dara were sitting in a bar, and we were just sitting having a pint, and this fella turned around and he's wearing like a fucking Lankum t-shirt, the old man, and he saw us, and we kind of looked at him and we're just like, all right, and he was like, oh, geez, lads, I'm so embarrassed. And it was just an awkward situation because he had to acknowledge it then, you know, and then he was just sitting across from us for the next few hours, and he was kind of just looking sheepish, and I was like, oh, this is weird.
Yeah, but that's the class thing about Ireland though as well. Like, you can be following people who are doing class stuff, and then you can see them walking down the street. Like, it's like, doesn't get to do that very often, like in other places, really.
Yeah, I really like that. I was having this conversation with someone a few years ago about how Ireland is much different in the way that it treats like kind of famous people or well-known people, you know. It's not like, I think in other countries they're much more like liable to do the whole, oh my God, you're like people getting mobbed coming down the streets. But like they were telling me, I didn't like know this story, but they're telling me some story about some like American stars that came over because they were like, oh, if they come to Ireland and they go to walk in the park, people are just like, oh, there's your man, yeah, whatever.
Which wasn't,
you know,
Matt Damon was in Dublin or something?
Yeah, I think he was around these parts actually on the south side, yeah. That's what I heard. He was living over here for a while, yeah.
Something else that I was meaning to ask you, I suppose, kind of connected to Lankum and stuff like that, and the lockdowns and the pandemic is something that you've mentioned on the podcast a few times is about Spotify and what's your kind of perspective on that now?
Like, I don't really have any like great nuanced take on it. I just think that Spotify is like fucking horrible. It's terrible. And I kind of get offended because now and again someone will send me a link and I'm like, oh yeah, check out this band I'm listening to, and they'll send me a link on Spotify, and I'm like, why the fuck are you sending me Spotify? Like, I don't have anything to do with it. I'm like, to be honest, very few times I've looked it up if I'm looking for like an old recording of some LP that came out in the 60s or something, and it's funny that sometimes it would be on Spotify and nowhere else, but usually if it's something I'd rather, like, speaking as somebody in a band, I'd rather that people just downloaded our albums from Soulseek or something, even rather than going on Spotify. Because it's so thing, you kind of feel like you have to be on it these days because that's where people go. But I really think that's such a shame. You know, I'd love to see a big shift to Bandcamp, who seem to be just much more on the money with regards to how they see themselves and, you know, how they operate and the whole system, the way it works. And just that
attitude towards Spotify, I think, is shifting somewhat as well, in the same way that people have become more conscious of supporting bands by buying their merch or buying albums online directly from them because of the whole pandemic and stuff like that there. So, like, with the way that Spotify, I suppose, like, the reason I asked you the question in the first place is because most people experience Spotify as a user who's listening to it. So you sign up for your monthly thing and then you can listen to all the music you want to. But you're kind of talking about it from an artist's perspective.
Yeah.
And what is that experience like on the other side of it?
Well, it's like it's the kind of same story you hear everywhere, that it takes so many thousands of plays on Spotify to get like a few cents or whatever payment from them. It's very, very hard for the artists who are on Spotify to get any kind of remuneration at all, you know, because the payment that they actually give to the artists who they're streaming is an absolute pittance. And then you hear stories about, like, was it some head or CEO of Spotify said that artists are going to have to work harder and put out more albums because it's not realistic for them to think that they can just put out an album every few years and make a living from it, you know. Stuff like that, that is just infuriating to hear, as, you know, as somebody who, has worked really hard trying, like, you know, making music and having that as my sole income for the last 5 or 6 years, you know.
So it's kind of like an exploitative relationship that Spotify has with the artists.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, because obviously they're getting money for, you know, people getting premium subscriptions and are signing up for however, I don't know how much it costs, like a tenner a month or 20 quid a month or whatever. None of that is gone back to the artists' pockets, you know.
So it's what way is it different on Bandcamp then? Is it?
Well, in Bandcamp, you actually make money every time because, you know, people pay for your music. So the system on Bandcamp is that you can listen to something for free. After you listen to it 2 or 3 times from the same IP address, you get a little sign coming up saying, basically, are you going to buy this? So it's like, says, oh, it's time to open thy heart and thy wallet. You know, are you going to buy it or not? And if you say no, then this little heart breaks. Then if you say yeah, it's like, oh, nice one, and then you buy the thing. But the thing is, when you actually pay Bandcamp the money, so obviously they take a cut, but the majority of that money goes to the actual artist, whether you're buying a record or just buying a digital album or whatever. And what I really like is that over the lockdown as well, in recognition of the fact that all musicians and artists are experiencing hardship due to COVID, they had these Bandcamp Fridays where, like, every fortnight they would not charge the Bandcamp fees. So basically any money you gave to an artist, they would get the whole lot on these Bandcamp Fridays. And there's also an option if you want to pay more for an album, you can as well. So if you're like, I want to support this band, I want the album costs like, you know, $9.99, but, you know, I'll send them 20 quid or whatever to give them a bit extra, you know, because I want to support them. You can do that as well. So it's a much more artist friendly kind of system that they have over there, you know, and that's something that I would be much more in favour of supporting. And it'd be really nice to kind of see a general shift, you know, people thinking about where their music comes from and, you know, how they're like interacting with that, and are they really supporting the artists that they want to support. Like, if you actually like an artist, like, why would you listen to them on Spotify? You know, you're doing them a disservice. Like, just go on to Bandcamp and you can listen to it and see if you like it a few times, and if you do, just send them a few bob.
It does feel like, with the way that things are going at the minute, that for example, with the festival scene, that when festivals come back online, that they're going to be much smaller because of the numbers and stuff, and because of the way that artists are more and performers are more reliant on the people who are following them to actually support them. Like that, we're kind of coming into this era of a stronger connection between the listeners and the artists, and also like kind of a more selective era as well, where, you know, the thing with Spotify is like it's unlimited, but like a few years ago I started collecting, maybe like about 6 years ago, collecting vinyls, and the thing that I love most about having the record is that, like, something that I kind of picked up from my dad has got a really lovely record collection, but he knows like every Bob Dylan album that was ever released, when it came out, what studio it came from, the track listing, what was on the A side, what was on the B side, what was on the cover, like sometimes even who took the picture of it, what was on the cover. And it was that kind of thing that attracted me to starting to collect the vinyls again. Is it's more like you're kind of like spending some quality time with the music and getting to know it. And in a way, like I feel like we're kind of coming into an era where that's becoming more important again, where it's not like 30,000 people at a festival and an absolute abundance of all different stages, and you can just end up at one anywhere. That it's going to have to be smaller festivals with smaller lineups where you're consciously choosing to go and see, like, this is the band that I want to go and see, that therefore this is the festival I'm going to.
No, it's interesting saying that about your dad, because I remember like back in the 90s, mid 90s, when I would have started buying records, I'd go into the record shop. You know, there was a few really great secondhand record shops around Dublin at that time. There was it like Freebird's the one? There was one on Eden Quay anyway, like downstairs from a newsagent, and I used to go down there, and sometimes I'd just buy an album because I liked the cover of it, you know. I'm like, oh, I've heard of that band. Oh, yeah, you know, it's £5 or whatever. I'll buy that. You know, it looks cool. And then I'll bring it home and you stick it on, and you would, like, you know, spend time looking at the lyrics and reading the notes or whatever. But you would spend time with it, and no matter what it was, you would give it, you know, you'd give it your time, and that the time and energy that you would put into it would be repaid, and you would, like, no matter what it was, you'd find something good about it, and you'd kind of just end up getting into it anyway, because you'd spend that much time. Like, you're after spending money on it and you have the things, so it's like, yeah, I'm going to listen to it again and again. And, you know, it mightn't be stuff that I listen to now, but that whole aspect is gone, you know, when we kind of, it just says a lot about the culture that we're into, that you just want that, like, instant satisfaction of something, and if it doesn't hit you straight away, you're just like, oh, I'll just listen to the next thing. And it kind of, you know, I think art and music and the kind of end result of this stuff is kind of very devalued, in that it's so available to you without any, like, you don't have to put any effort into it at all. You just literally have to click on a screen and you have a whole new album coming up, and if it doesn't hit you within the first minute or two, you can just go, oh, whatever, turn it off, stick on something else, and it's all just there in front of you, you know. Whereas it was just such a different experience getting into new music back then for me, because it was so much work. You're paying your hard-earned money to get this, like, slab of vinyl, so you're almost like, well, yeah, I'm gonna find a way to get into this, even if I don't like it at first. I'm gonna just keep listening to it until I like it, you know.
Yeah, like more of an event.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I haven't said that, like, you could still make an event, like, you don't have to have a vinyl collection to make, like, your relationship with new music more meaningful. Like, you can still do that where it's like but I guess the common theme is that you're taking the time to kind of, like, delve into the thing that you're listening to, or that you're experiencing or whatever.
Yeah, and I just think whatever, you know, you have to put energy into these things to get something out of it, you know. And I think whatever energy you do put in is always, like, repaid, you know, tenfold. I think, I mean, and don't get me wrong, there's so many, like, aspects of technology that I love. Like, I wouldn't be able to do the fire drawn air shows that I'm doing now without, like, ready access to so much music and archival music just at my fingertips on the internet and stuff like that, you know, or, like, ripping stuff off YouTube or whatever, you know. That wouldn't be possible without the technology we have. But I think that if you kind of I don't know. I just think if you're not conscious of it, you can easily just slip into that thing where you're like, oh, and you become just really just kind of dazed and desensitized to like everything. You're just like, oh, whatever. It's just, just another thing on my internet browser. And I think that's a shame. I think it's a shame because every bit of music out there, somebody has sat down with that and they've put their time and energy and a lot of times their heart and their soul into it. And for that to become just this disposable product that, that is just so easily accessible to everybody and therefore doesn't hold that much value to people, I think that's a big shame.
Yeah, for sure. Class.
Yeah. That's what I think about that. Well, how have we delved into all the topics there?
We have delved. Thanks a million for spending the time here and having the chats. Class.
Oh, not at all. It's an absolute pleasure, and to be able to just thanks for indulging me in my strange hobbies.
So usually I suppose kind of finish up with asking how people can find your stuff, but I'm pretty sure that by this stage everyone who's listening to this is already going to know about the Fire Drawn Year podcast, which is like on all of the podcast platforms really, as far as I can see.
Yeah, it is now, and I'm really glad that I did that because I was only putting it up on Mixcloud before, and mate of mine, Johnny Dillon, who does the really excellent Blurring Bailadish podcast, Folklore Fragments, he was saying, oh no, basically what you do is stick up on SoundCloud, you link it to this and that, and then it's just going to be up everywhere. And I was like, oh, deadly, yeah, why don't I just do that? So I haven't looked back. And just type in Fire Drawn Year somewhere on the internet and I'll come up. And
actually, there was one other thing that I was going to ask you about.
Right.
Was about
all good.
About Patreon.
Patreon, yeah. Yeah, actually, I was going to bring that up there when we were talking about before, just, kind of being in closer contact with people who want to support you and people being selective and having that relationship with, and I was going to say, because, you know yourself, obviously, you've got your own Patreon as well. I think that's a really great model.
I remember we were chatting about it. It must have been back in May or something like that there. I think it was actually before your Patreon really kind of kicked off properly. Maybe. And I
think I've only started doing it. It was like September or something, maybe.
Yeah. So it was before that when we were chatting about it last time, and I think it's a really cool platform. Like you say, so people can. I'm so grateful. I've heard you talking about this on Fire Drawn Year as well. When you hear people saying, "Oh, I'm so grateful to the people who've been supporting the podcast," but then it's true though.
I know, it really is. Because I used to, I'm kind of quite cynical sometimes, and you hear people saying things like, you're going, oh, fuck off. Yeah, you're so grateful. Yeah. But then, it actually fills my heart with such joy. Sometimes, you kind of look at it, especially when people started signing up. I was nearly in tears looking at it. I was like, what, these people want to support me? It's amazing. And then all of a sudden, then you've become one of those people who are like, oh my God, guys, I'm so grateful. But it's true.
But it is class. That's actually one of the main reasons why we are doing the podcast fortnightly now instead of doing it weekly, was to be able to just kind of be in more contact with people who are supporting the show. And because I think that's the beauty of the podcast format is that you're putting something out there and it becomes accessible for everybody, and then you're kind of building this relationship in a way with the people that are listening, or they're building it with you, and you're just kind of forming a little group of people who are kind of interested in the topics at hand. And the thing that I kind of feel about this podcast is that the topics, sometimes there are things that people aren't that aware of or familiar with, or something that's new, or from an area that, because the topics are so varied, that there might be someone listening to this one who's a big Lankum fan, but then they might come and listen to the one next week. It could be about something that they haven't got a clue about, and it just kind of starts the conversations, and people can kind of talk about it and stuff. And so it has been good. And
Well, I think it's amazing that it's a two-way thing as well, because actually since I've started doing the Patreon, I've gotten in contact with like some really fucking interesting people that have signed up to it, and we just started writing to each other, and you're like, wow, I never would have like found this contact and this communication with these people. I wouldn't have known about them. They wouldn't have known about me. Like if this hadn't been set up, and that's a really amazing part of it that I didn't really think about.
I think that maybe it's like somewhat connected to what you were saying about viewing like art and stuff as not being as like just disposable and throwaway. Is the thing with the podcast, which I don't even know. Maybe I've said it a few times before on this podcast, but I don't know if it's something that people would be aware of, or I'm not even sure. I'm sure. It must be something that you experience as well. But making the podcast, it's not like I'm making the podcast, putting it out there, and then it's just as a one-way ticket for everyone to listen to, because like I'm really getting something out of making the podcast as well.
Totally.
Doing this chat and talking to other people and having the contact with people. Like during the first lockdown, doing the podcast was one of my main forms of like communication with the outside world.
Yeah.
It was doing so much for me.
Yeah. No, I love it. And even, for me to be able to like, because the stuff that I'm coming up with on the podcast and, finding connections between these songs or I'm like, I didn't know about this before. I'm literally just finding this because I'm looking into it for the podcast. And so it's all like a new journey for me as well, and for me to just have the excuse to do that and to have a purpose to do that and not be just like, oh, I'm wasting my time just like fucking faffing around on the internet. I'm like, no, I'm actually doing this and I'm making this thing because of it. It's really amazing.
Yeah, and the people are on the other side that kind of like are really interested in it as well. Completes the cycle or whatever.
Yeah, I feel like I'm just really, really grateful to be in this position in life, where I can look into the things that like really like interest me and that I'm passionate about, and that other people get stuff that are getting the same feeling from it as well. That's like it's magic.
Class. Right.
Cool. That's
it. That's a wrap.
Nice one.
Unreal. Fuck here. That was classic.
Wow. Not at all. Fucking Anla. That was such a pleasure to do. Absolutely.
This episode of the Rebel Matters podcast was presented by me, Anla O'Carolan, and produced by Vicky Langan. The Rebel Matters podcast is supported and funded by the listeners of the show through Patreon. So if you'd like to support the Rebel Matters podcast and get behind what we're doing, you can go to patreon.com/Rebel Matters, where you will find the 3 various tiers of support that you can pick from, all of which are named after our favourite native Irish trees. That's all from us this week. A Cardigail, Soka Jean Caderella, Slang of Foil, August Kenny Fury.